Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hired, where we speak with incredible leaders about their unconventional journeys to success. I'm your host, Mike Thompson, and on today's show, we welcome Matthew Schulz, CTO at FutureFit AI. Matthew takes us on an incredible adventure as he shares his captivating journey, from his days as a teenage lifeguard to his early passion for computers and gaming. He recounts the fascinating moments that shaped his path. He enlightens us about his time at University of Waterloo and the exhilarating experience of riding his motorcycle through Banff and Jasper. Prepare to be inspired by his remarkable story. Let's dive in and meet Matthew. So Matthew, take me to the beginning. Not the actual beginning, but like childhood for you. What was it like? What were mom and dad, siblings? What did the house look like growing up?
Yeah, great question. So I grew up in the Danforth area, so Greek town. I had an older brother, 2 years older, a mother and father. And I'd say my childhood was very fortunate. I had a loving family. I fought with my brother a lot, but I think that's pretty typical for older brothers. Didn't have a lot of money growing up, but my parents really, where we spent our money was on experiences and things like swimming and karate. So it was very kind of physical and active. Always had a kind of academic lens, but really didn't focus on school or grades until it counted in the last years of high school. Because when I looked at the university I wanted to get in and looked at the grades you need to get, I was like, okay, probably time to get a little bit more serious. But I'd say I was quite fortunate in my growing up in my youth.
Amazing. And did both parents work? Did mom stay home? What was the dynamic kind of growing up in the family?
Yeah, so my father worked. He was a small appliance electrician repair. My mother took care of me and my brother when we were younger, and then went into like a nanny situation. So we'd have, help me later transition into some babysitting because I grew up with some kids in the household that my mom would also help take care of, and then end up babysitting them when they got older.
Awesome. And you mentioned kind of that the big expenses when you were growing up was experiences, and that's kind of something that you did. What was the first memory you have as a kid of an experience that was just like, this is amazing, whether it was summer or vacation or something? What was the first memory you have of an epic experience?
Oh, that's really hard. It's hard to go back and remember epic things from your childhood. Um, I think my father was always encouraging to like push yourself, try something new. So my father, I would say, is a pseudo amateur mechanic, really liked fixing cars and motorbikes. So his dream was to get us all motorbikes and ride as a family. So he had got, encouraged me to get my license and my motorcycle license, got us a small dirt bike. And there was like I live in the Danforth area, so, quite downtown. And maybe four houses down, there was a laneway that kind of cut between houses. And so when I was learning to ride, like, didn't have a full license at the time as a dirt bike, and we'd wheel the dirt bike down to that laneway, and we'd rip the dirt bike up and down the laneway, for most of the day, which was just incredible as a young kid. And then the next year when I got my license, I could ride on the road, and then I noticed that they put up a big fence there, and then the laneway was locked. So you know, a short-lived thing, but it was quite an epic memory for me being able to ride and learn in the city.
Do you think you and your brother were the reason they put that fence up there?
100%, no doubt. Like two kids on a Saturday squealing a dirt bike in a laneway, like absolutely, now as having a house and, in the area, like probably would have been pretty annoying for the families in the area. So I felt a little bit bad, but at the time it was a wild experience.
That's amazing. And did you ever get to have that moment with the family, everybody getting bikes, going on some sort of trip or vacation? Did that ever come to fruition?
Yeah. Hey, great question. So probably not. My father's full dream was like the multi-generation. So now my kids on dirt bikes, and his wife on a bike as well. So like imagine like a whole Schultz family, but like so that has not yet come to fruition. However, my brother got into motorbikes as well, bought a bike. I had bought a bike later in life as well. So we had a chance, the father and the sons to ride together. And I've always wanted to ride across Canada on a motorbike.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, However, with my career and career focus, like that's a logistical big time to take off work. And also, someone warned me like the prairies are going to be probably pretty boring. And, that might not be well thought out. And I ended up meeting my lovely wife, Laura, who, is very supportive of my passions and interests, but not. I had a super sport bike, so very uncomfortable for a passenger. So she was like, "Hey, love your hobby, but I just hate riding on this thing."
Mhm.
So we one of our first vacations together was kind of a compromise vacation. So we flew out to Calgary. She got to pick a ridiculous Harley that we rented out of Calgary. So you can imagine one of those giant bikes with the back seat with radio, heated, super comfortable. And then we got to like ride through the Rockies to like Banff and Jasper. And that was a quite an experience, and probably the only motorcycle ride she approved of and yeah, enjoyed.
What do you think if you could go back and tell the childhood version of yourself that was ripping up and down in that laneway, fast forward, that you're going to be going on an epic ride through the Rockies? What do you think the kid would say looking back?
I think I'd say I probably was maybe a little bit cocky. So I was like, yeah, of course I'm going to do that. Like that's what I want to do. So that's what I'm going to do. So like, why? This is old news, Matthew. Why, future Matthew? Tell me something interesting is probably what I would say. So I think I was very like goal focused from a young age of like, hey, if this is what I want to do, like, what are the steps to get there? And really, when I'm like focused on something, it's I give it my all and work it till I get there, I guess.
That's amazing. So outside of dirt bikes and riding, you mentioned kind of karate was another hobby growing up. Is that something that continued for a length of time, or what were the main hobbies outside of school? Because you mentioned kind of school was just there getting in the way of life at that point. So what was exciting you outside of school?
Yeah, like I really enjoyed spending time with friends. Got into video games, which probably led into especially
Mm,
computer games, which is what kind of drove my career into computer engineering. Kind of that interest level. Um, I would say I was fairly active up until high school, where my the benefits of staying into the sports was just less of like more into getting into social things. The swimming did serve me well because I ended up being a lifeguard and swimming instructor, which was a great job growing up. So did both pools, ended up working at the Woodbine beaches as a lifeguard for the Toronto Police, which it was yeah, just an incredible experience.
wow, that's wild. I mean, how when were you a lifeguard? Was it through high school? Did you do it through college? Like,
Yeah, high school for sure. I stopped when I went to the University of Waterloo. Just the studies was a lot for me, so I need to focus on those. I had co-op jobs to make money on the off terms. But up from when I was 16 until I went away to university, I was very actively lifeguarding after school and on the weekends.
very cool, very cool. And when did gaming come into your life? And what was the first game you remember where it was like, oh, now it's changed. Like I'm into this.
Yeah, so I'd say my first gaming experience, and this is I'm gonna date myself terribly here, was my father's in television. I think it was a precursor to Nintendo. Um, but I'd say that really what got me into computers was it was a friend's sleepover. His mom worked at IBM, so they had like an original, like old school IBM, and he had a game called Dune 2, which was like a
Mm,
precursor to like an RTS strategy game. And I was just, I think I remember like I'm not even going to talk to anyone for the whole sleepover. I'm just going to play this game as much as I can. I was like, and that really kind of got me into computer games, which I was very active on, to my probably my parents' disappointment for a bit. But then once I got into high school, it's like, okay, I got to focus on social and getting grades. So I had quit gaming to get through school and get my career established.
oh, really? You kind of put gaming in, like when you got into high school, you kind of put it on hold and kind of stopped at least temporarily in terms of as an interest.
Yeah, for sure. Just
Huh.
cold turkey, full stop. Yeah, like video games are a great source of entertainment, but yeah, sometimes time is precious, and I just need the time to focus on other things.
Amazing. Did you think when you were playing and got introduced to it that you wanted to do this for a living? Like computers was something where it was like, oh wow, this would be great if I could do this as a profession in some capacity, or was it just like this is just fun, I'm just playing, and that's kind of where it stopped?
Yeah, I think like games are now a lot easier to play, but often, let's say back in the day, like installing games and getting them to work and dialing up a friend's modem to play multiplayer was a little bit more. So you would naturally learn computer skills and troubleshooting through that. But probably what solid and I always enjoyed the power of computers and the purity of the logic and the processing. So like a lot of things resonated with me there from an interest perspective. But probably what sealed the deal for me, like picking a career path, was probably my godfather. He told me about this program in Waterloo, and it was where it was one of during like a tech bubble where it's like, oh, everyone out of there, makes $100,000 as graduating. The companies are so desperate they give everyone Ferrari. So I'm like, this sounds good to me. Tell me more about this program. So, and that's what kind of set me down that path and ended up being a great career choice. And when I was graduating, it had burst, so there was no crazy offer or Ferrari for me waiting for me at graduation, but still a good career path in the end.
So was your godfather in technology, and or was he just aware of the bubble? Like what was he doing, and how was that influence shaping, and when did that happen in terms of your path?
Yeah, so I'd say he was a technology enthusiast. I think he was a machinist by trade, and actually became like I think a high school teacher as well. So just a really highly intelligent, philosophical, good guiding light for me, and I really respected his opinion. And growing up in high school, it's hard to figure out what you want to do. And I was like, hey, if I get into the hardest program that makes the most money, like it's probably easy to pivot from there if it doesn't work out. So I followed his advice, and yeah, it worked out quite well for me, I guess.
I love that your career started, and what started you on the path of technology was the dream of getting a Ferrari upon graduation and making 100 grand out of school, which you're like, yeah. So it could have been any profession at that point. Like I could be talking to you and you could be doing something completely different if your godfather had been like, you know what you should get into? Get into marketing or something like that. It could be a very different path.
For sure. I mean, if he suggests something like singing or dancing, which I'm terrible at, like I definitely probably would be like, what's your second choice? But it overlapped with some of my interests and seemed like a great fit. So yeah, it's definitely happy to take that path.
University of Waterloo is a hard program to get into. You kind of mentioned school was not something you really took serious until the end. Were you a good student when you needed to be? Like you must have had good grades to be able to get into Waterloo.
Yeah, I think in my last 2 years where they look at the grades, I was very fortunate to get very high grades. I think I would say I was an interesting student where like I don't think I was a good student. So like if I think I had like I think the teachers respected me because I could get the answer right, but I was definitely not the model student in class, probably a little bit of a troublemaker. Um, but yeah, so I definitely not describe myself as a good student, but definitely worked the system to get good grades to get into Waterloo.
Were you a troublemaker because you didn't like necessarily agree with the system of learning, or was it just like just your nature that was just kind of who you are?
I think it was maybe a mix of like how interested was I in it, like mm, maybe I disagreed with how we were teaching, or I wanted it done in a different way. So I was like, okay, I know I got to be here and get good on the exam or the test to get to where I need to be, but and I also think I enjoy humor, sometimes teasing, giving people hard time. So as an immature youth, I definitely tested that boundary with the teachers as much as I could to have a little fun. Um, yeah, in my youth, I suppose.
Did you apply to a few universities or just Waterloo, or and did you get into all of them and have to choose, or what was that process like?
Yeah, I think at the time for like an engineering computer, like Toronto and Queens were like my other choices. I applied to both because hey, tough schools to get into. Who knows? So good to hedge your bets, and I was fortunate to get I think accepted to all three, and Waterloo was my top choice, so I decided to go there.
Amazing. And what did your troublemaker nature change when you got to Waterloo? Was it because the courses now interest you and you saw that it was, more closely tied to what your passions were and what you wanted to learn about? Like did you see an attitude change when you showed up at Waterloo?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say I'm always a little bit of a troublemaker, but now I've refined that and I point that in a more positive way. Like where can I And I think from a career perspective, it's more of like the openness to challenge things, disrupt things, do things differently, ask difficult questions. So I'd say I've refined my personality to be more productive as I've matured as an adult. Um, but I would say, like, I had a really fortunate experience in high school. So some people have a bad experience in high school. I had a really great experience. I had, a group of friends who were very academic, a group of friends that, more social. And, it was a really great experience for me. When I went to the University of Waterloo, I didn't connect as much as that experience, which was
Mm.
disappointing to me. So it was more of like, put in my time, get my degree, and get out of there. So I think different experiences connect with more people. And I thought I'd actually love Waterloo. Like, hey, everyone's interested, everyone's here to work hard, but yeah, it just didn't connect with me, I guess.
Interesting, because usually people have different, like where high school is get me out of here, and university you go and kind of meet, you find your tribe, right, and find
Yeah,
kind of a comfort. And for you is the opposite. So Waterloo
totally.
is very much. It seemed like you were interested in what you were studying, but social wise, just couldn't find your tribe of individuals that um, gel with, and that just I guess just happened. So
Yeah.
when you were at Waterloo 4 years. Did you know, were there specific areas within the program that you gravitated towards that you liked more, or was it kind of all of them kind of piqued your interest the same through the program?
Yeah, I think I did enjoy, like, it was an electrical and computer mixed course, so we had like a lot of electrical courses, and I was very interested in the electrical courses because my dad was, an electrician and did small appliance repair, so I had a kind of a natural interest there. But I definitely gravitated as I went through more to the software side of things, just from a career, ease of entry. Hardware is a much longer path and more difficult path. So, looking for the quick win at the end, went for the software path, which is more accessible. But I'd say my interest was more in like the outcomes, and I towards the end it was less about the, oh, I'm really interested in this course, but more of like, all right, how am I graduating with the best possible experience to like,
Mm,
and I found there was a very, what was surprising to me is the value. Like, I did a co-op program at Waterloo. What I was learning on the co-op terms felt incredibly disconnected from what I was learning in class. Like, there was some theory that was applicable and helpful. However, like, I'd say 10% value from the learning the courses, like 90% value in the co-op terms. And
huh.
so I began to get less, I'm not interested in the courses, but like realize that my success wasn't going to be, the theory, of a specific programming paradigm in an interview or in real life. So gravitated more to the work experience.
Was there any co-op term work experience that stood out as more impactful for you as you look back in terms of what you were doing in that term?
Yeah, the co-op terms were defining for me.
Mm,
I like I think someone gave me advice of like, hey, mix it up, like go for different companies of different types. And a little bit at the time, like you get what you get as well, like depending on your level as a co-op student. So, but I always try to like mix up that experience because you got to go to like Waterloo. I did 4-month terms. So it's like you get to try 4 or 5 different companies at different roles and see what you liked and what you didn't like. And so one of my terms was for a Toronto startup called Platespin, later got acquired. Had a phenomenal manager named Adam, who just, I still reference my experience in that co-op
mm.
term and like the things that he taught me and like the things I learned of, because they were so pivotal. And I really think I'm a big supporter of co-op programs of like really helping people start their career and understanding what both they like and don't like in different jobs.
Very cool. It sounds like, from the quotes, especially with placement, you found your tribe. You were at university and kind of didn't like were interested, but still unsure. And then you get to go to work and you work for a company and you find, and you're like, yes, like this, not learning, like doing was kind of the moment for you that you realize, like, I got to work and do stuff.
Yeah, I think you've captured it better than I did, so thank you. Like, I like learning when it achieves an outcome or a purpose. And like work is very much like, especially in the technology field, I think it's very unique of like we constantly have to learn. Technology is changing all the time. So it's like, how do we continuously learn to achieve better outcomes?
Yeah. I mean, even your dirt bike on the laneway. You were learning how to ride so you could end up in the Rockies one day. You knew that there was a reason why you were learning to get there. There was an
There you go.
objective that you were working towards. So you go through the co-op terms. It gets point to graduation. Had you started applying for jobs before that? Were you interviewing for a lot of places? Were you quite selective? Like, what did you think you wanted to do? And did the co-op terms help you direct in terms of paths, what you liked and what you didn't like when you had to get your first job?
Yeah, I think the co-op terms definitely informed me of what I liked, what I didn't like, and where I wanted to go directionally. I think they were also pivotal of having that experience that employers look for. So I think it really helped me get my foot in the door at various places or various interview cycles. Um, I would say I was not, let's say, the most fortunate student where it's like, oh, I worked at Amazon and Microsoft. So it's like, I had 5 people calling me for jobs when I was graduating. I wasn't that fortunate from a co-op experience. So I worked really hard applying for a bunch of companies and kind of tying it back to the motorcycle experience, like coming out of Waterloo, had some fortunate co-op jobs. And so the two things I wanted to do in life was like buy a motorbike and ride across the country and travel the world. And, looking at like finances and what I could afford and coming out of school with a job of like, okay, I want to do both. I probably can't afford to do both very quickly. So what I'll do is I'll put my resources from a cash perspective to buying a motorbike, and I will get a job as a consultant, and they're going to pay me to travel the world. So my first job out of school is for a software company as a professional services consultant.
Amazing. What was the bike you bought right out of school? Do you remember what it was? Do you remember
100%,
shopping
I
for it? Yeah.
definitely remember. It was a matte black Gixxer Suzuki 600. Yeah, it was, and it was those kind of bikes are just way too fast for just reasonable city streets. So also, you gotta contain yourself because it's way more power than should be legally allowed on the road.
Were you advising your dad when you were buying that bike, or was it this a solo mission? Was he supportive of like, yes, do this and travel like going, or was it more practical where it's like you need to go to work and you need to start your career? Or what was the support system like
Yeah,
in family?
that's a great question. I think both my parents are incredibly supportive. Um, but my father will always is never shy with his advice. However, I think because he was always strongly opinionated and always was comfortable with advice and challenged me to push myself, it's like there was no like it was very self-directed of like I've decided to get a bike and he's like cool. Like he might give me advice. I choose maybe to listen to it or not. But like I think one of the gifts I got from my father was being very confident in myself in terms of decision making and moving forward. So he'll always give me good advice. Sometimes I listen, sometimes I don't.
And your brother being a couple years older, was he working? Like, were there was a pressure to follow his path or chart your own, or what was that pressure like, given that he was a couple years older?
Yeah, I think I think my parents, so no direct pressure with my brother. So he was working on his own path, took a different path than I did from like a career area perspective. But it was very, I would say mm, it wasn't a competition with my brother or anything. It was more of like, what is my path and what's my path to success?
Very cool. So you get this job, you've got your bike, consultant. Did you get to travel across North America, the world on your bike while you were working? Did it actually like work out the way you thought it was going to?
Yes and no. So, the first client I got, which I was super excited about, was in Toronto. So I was like, out of all the places you could have sent me, like, why are you sending me to Toronto? But that actually worked really well for my career. However, I later moved into different roles at that company, and I got to travel and. Sometimes as a consultant, for anyone who's been a consultant, like sometimes you get to go to really nice places. Sometimes you get to go to the middle of nowhere and it's not so fun. But where I got to travel was, I call it the glamour travel, was more for like conferences, meeting prospects or clients. So I got to go to like Romania, Paris, all through the States, like New York, like really really nice places. And the company was really flexible and reasonable. So if I can show them hey, if I fly out a couple days later, the price is the same. I'll cover the extra 2 days of hotels. They were always super reasonable about that. So always tacked on a couple extra days for trips to do a little travel and explore in the areas.
Very cool, very cool. And your role primarily, you were technical, but there was also a sales aspect to it as well. Like, did you like kind of doing not just purely technical, but kind of a bit of a hybrid where it was a more business mix with tech?
Yeah, I think so. I had a variety of roles at that company. I later moved into a product management role where I was really close from a partner sales perspective. And like as a product manager, I'd speak at conferences and position our product and meet clients. And so that was what led me more to that kind of travel. I think what was an eye opener for me of like coming in of like, as an individual contributor, it's often like how good you are at the individual contributor work, but looking from a career perspective, what I think was the differentiator is the soft skills. Like if you're, really good at like pounding out lines of code, but you can't work as a team and you can't communicate, like that's really going to limit your career. So I really focused on, I'd say the learning and the science of business management leading. And I'll tie it back to my first co-op term, or sorry, one of my early co-op terms, that manager I mentioned. Like that was one of the managers that turned me on of like, hey, you don't just become a great manager. Like there's all this reading and resources and science out there of like how to motivate people, how to lead people, what makes a great manager, what makes a bad manager. And so it really turned my learning more to like how to be a leader, an effective leader.
Interesting. So that co-op term shaped you. You knowing when you entered the workforce, you didn't want to just be, for the, hands down coding for your career. You wanted to to be more of a manager track. That was something you were aware of going into the workforce?
Yeah, I think so yes, but I'll refine it slightly where it's like, how can I maximize my income? And like my early, hey, like I get 100,000 out of grad and a Ferrari at my door. Like, how do I maximize like total income? Because like that, opens a lot of doors in terms of opportunities and flexibility. Like I've later shifted and refined my career and life goals, but yeah, at the time was okay. The way to make more money is to climb the corporate ladder.
Interesting, interesting. It's funny that your story is shaped by motorcycles and Ferraris. Like those
Yeah.
are those are things that shaped all of the major decisions in your life.
Yeah, I do like to go fast, but yeah, not anymore, of course.
And it's, looking back, having this opportunity at a school from a consulting perspective where you got to try a bunch of different roles was invaluable because you probably knew from this experience where you wanted to go next. And when you were in that role, was there a direction that you wanted to go based on the experience you had?
Yeah, I think, and I've kind of refined this, and I share this a lot with people when they're asking for career advice. Of like initially, I was like, okay, how do I like just make more money and move up, and I'll kind of go for the openings. But more and more, it's realizing like really understanding what you enjoy doing, that you're naturally good at, and you get into flow and the zone really quickly. And what are you not good at? And
Mm.
then really looking at career moves of like, where can I do more things that I like doing that I'm really good at? And I do less and less of what I'm not good at. And I think that's the key, I think, for in my experience, has been my success and also where I've helped other people guide their careers of like, don't try and follow my path or someone else's path. Like figure out what you're really good at and what you naturally excel at, and be really good at that. And you'll naturally get opportunities to move up and be promoted and, make more money by following that. But if you try and do something that you don't enjoy, it's really hard to be really good at someone and good at something and successful when you don't enjoy what you're doing.
So what was it that you were good at in your first job at a school that got you in flow and realized like that you were going to double down and continue on to the next?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So from that pivotal co-op term, like I'd spent a long time like reading and studying around like people management, like organizational structure, and where like having a strong co-op experience in education at the Waterloo, like I was a strong individual contributor, so that obviously helped. And I think maybe two or three thoughts. It's like nothing replaces hard work. So like I worked really hard to like do really well on my projects or assignments and drive results so that I'd have the opportunity to be considered for an advancement or a role.
Mm.
I also then realized, like from a more of a manager into an individual contributor to a manager role of like being a great individual contributor doesn't necessarily make you a great manager, and you can't individual contributor your way out to success as a manager. It's all about building the right team, alignment, motivation, engagement. And I think those are very common terms and common strategies now, but like 10 to 15 years ago when I was starting my career, like I felt that I had discovered plutonium. Like I was like, oh my God, nobody else knows about this secret. So like my teams were always able to be way more successful and drive results. And, when I was able to show that my teams were successful, that will open opportunities up for me and also open up opportunities for me to promote and elevate my teams.
It's really interesting that even 10 years ago, when you were in that role, you realized that, you don't have to have the success. Your team can have the success, and that will elevate you. Where do you think that inspiration came from? Because that's like, now we know there's a lot of studies on people management and the value of coaching or whatever it may be. But back then, not so much. It was, succeed at your job to be very good at it and you will get promoted. But it was all individualized instead of team based. So where do you think that came from?
I think reading. And so as I mentioned, that manager like got me hooked on to like, hey, there's the business or like learning about business and all of these concepts. So I think I became a very avid reader in that space and learning like, okay, what does the current research say? Like how to be successful in these areas. And that's, just put in the work and did the reading and did the research. And then it was also practice. Like I got opportunities to practice those skills and refine them. And, sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And that's how you kind of grow and evolve as a manager as well.
Do you think that co-op experience was critical? Because reading alone and learning about what works is kind of like just doing the studies at Waterloo, but the value you got at the co-op term, seeing that, hey, most of the actual learning and advancement comes from doing, was kind of critical to set you up to know, hey, I can read about success and what it looks like, but I actually got to apply it and try some stuff to advance my learning.
I think so. And I didn't get to be a manager at the co-op term, of course. However, it got me on the path of thinking about it, and I continued to build that knowledge base. And then where there were opportunities to leverage that, to demonstrate those skills, like I took advantage of those to get that first promotion into individual contributor to like a manager role or a lead role. And it was definitely through the practice of that. And I think for like, it's often from an individual contributor to manager role, it's a difficult jump. So, you have to be very strong from an individual contributor perspective. You also have to, I'd say, make it known that you're interested in moving up your career and like make it easy for your boss of like, hey, here's what I'm looking to do, or here's where I want to grow, so that they have a clear path and maybe how they could support you. And then I think what I failed to realize early on, but now have a very good appreciation for is, when a manager is considering who to promote, they're not only looking at you as an individual, but they're looking at what the team and their peers are going to say about that promotion.
Mm.
And so one thing, when I got that consulting job, there was always different job. When you're like starting at a company, sometimes you get the least fun jobs to do. And I remember one of the least fun jobs at a software company was documentation. And documentation back in the day was, giant binders of documentation that were just terrible to write and terrible to read. And it was like, tell me what the print button does. Well, the print button prints the paper from the screen. And there was some like availability where like the head of documentation needed some help. And so I was like, hey, I got some availability. And I read that documentation so thoroughly. I like corrected little grammar mistakes, made suggestions. It was like, I really gave it my all for like the worst job at the company. And like that director of documentation was just incredibly appreciative. And what I later realized that she was related to one of the owners of the company. And so you never know, like every job you do, even if it doesn't seem that important, to like give it your 100%, get the details right, because you don't like that's going to reflect on you and be a key consideration of like, when you make that next promotion. Because as a manager, it's like, hey, I'm looking to promote this person. Like they have to make the story of like why, both to the other staff of why they picked this person, but also to their peers. And if their peers are all saying like, oh yeah, I've worked with Matt, he's great, I can see that he deserves that promotion, that makes it easier. You're making it easier for your
Mm.
boss to get you that promotion. But if they go, it's like, yeah, I've never heard of Matt, I don't know, it wasn't, he did this thing for me one time and it was no good, like it's going to make it hard for you. So really the power of working across the company just can't be understated.
That's great, and what a great story to kind of have that early on in your career. See, like, oh wow, this is really important. A lot of individuals don't get that experience till much later, right? So,
Yeah.
as you navigated your career and kind of moved on, were you looking for growth? Was it strategically, hey, I like this? Were opportunities presented to you that you weren't looking, that were like, oh wow, I got to explore this? Or how did you navigate what growth looked like and made those decisions on, I think it's time for me to move on?
Yeah, so I think I put great questions in there. So I was never fortunate enough to someone like come up to me like, Matt, we think you're going to be great for a promotion. Here's a new team, and do it. Like it was always me driving for that. And I like it's all about getting noticed and adding value to the company and your boss. And I think looking for leaders who are successful themselves, because when they're successful and if they get promoted, allows you, like, as their
Mm,
responsibility grows, and if you've been a key part of that success, often they can bring you up with you. And so I think one thing that was really helpful for me is understanding both what are the priorities of the company and what are the priorities for my direct boss and what are his or her greatest challenges or problems. If you can pick one of those up and solve it for them or bring it to them with like, hey, here's my plan to solve your number one problem, I just need you to okay this thing and I'm going to solve this problem. Like, even if they think you can't do it, they're probably, well, like, hey, worst case scenario, he fails and I still got my problem. But like, if he's successful, wow. And like, I had a couple fortunate managers who took that gamble on me when I made those crazy pitches, and I worked my ass off to like
mm.
deliver those results. And it made it then easy to then, hey, like, I think Matt's ready for the next level because he's demonstrating that he can perform at that next level. And I think that's where my opportunities have gone in my career of like seeing problems not in my direct responsibility, but in other areas, and then taking those on and helping out and solving them. And, sometimes it's like, hey, Matt, we noticed you're solving this problem over there. It's like, yeah, like I can do that problem for you if you want full time. Like, yeah, let's make it like, and so
Hmm.
often it's though you got to show that you can really deliver before is how at least I've been successful moving up within organizations.
Very action oriented in your approach, is less about talking about what you can do and showing that you can do it to create opportunities.
100%, you nailed it. Because everyone can say they can do a good job, but what really I think counts in the end of like where you show up and deliver the results, then it's hard to argue with the measurable results.
So as you moved on from consulting and kind of moved over to the client side and kind of and started your career trajectory on there, was that a difficult transition? Was it a relatively easy one to move from consulting world where you're doing a lot, you're traveling a lot, to kind of a more, I want to say stable, but more client side opportunity?
Yeah. So I think I always looked for like to grow my career. And my early thing was like, how can I get high up, make a lot of money, get a lot of responsibility, like grow my career? I was I would always go for the biggest problem. And
Mm,
so, like, whether it was like, hey, this is where I think the biggest problem the company is, like, let me start getting close to that. Let me start helping that, or let me show how I can help there. And then that would like expand my accountability. And at some point in my career, it was like, okay, well, Matt, if this is so big, we want you to do it full time. Like, well, I don't want to lose my current foot in my door over here. Like, and it was a, it was a hard negotiation to take on both like keep my existing responsibility and absorb another
mm.
one. Um, and so it's keep and that was for me showing as a leader of like, hey, I've got that team running. I can keep managing that team. I will focus on this and bring that to success without I can show them I can do both. Um, and I think those transitions are always hard because you're stepping into a new area. You may not be an expert in those areas. And I think as you're growing even more as a leader, as an individual contributor, you can become an expert on something. And then if you become the manager or the lead in that area, like, well, you're an expert in the area you're leading. But as I progress my career, like and this is my goal from a team perspective, I'm hiring people who are much better experts at their pieces of the
Mhm.
pie than I am. And I think there's different kind of transitions in your career that are sometimes difficult to navigate. And that's another one of like, as a leader, you're very rarely the person with the best answer or like the magic solution. It's like, how do we get the best? How do we build the right team? How do we align the right team? How do we keep them engaged? And how do we make sure the best ideas from the team and the best solutions are the ones that we're picking and that then executing on?
Hmm. Interesting. Very cool. Did you always have visions as you were working through your career of CTO, the top from technology? That was the goal for you. That's what you're sprinting towards.
I would say no. I think I had a computer engineering background, so I always kept close to technology teams. But I was like the head of operations. I've been the head of product, um, and it's more around the what is the current problem the company's facing. And the good news for me from a career perspective, I have technology background. I always had those teams, so there's lots of people often have technology problems they need a CTO to solve. So that's definitely where I've had the most career success. So there's a lot of openings. But often either joining those companies or after I joined is like, hey, there's also this other thing over here that I think you have the background on. Like, can we absorb it into your responsibilities? And yeah, I'm always happy to help out in other areas as well. So I think for me, I'm more driven by where can I add the most value? Where can I do what I enjoy? And yeah, and how can I help the company be successful?
As you were focused on growth and kind of advancement, did you find balance, like work-life balance, hard as you kind of navigated through that, pouring so much energy and effort into your career?
Yeah, I think it's an individual choice that everyone needs to make. And I think what I did doesn't, or my balance has changed over different times in my career. And I think everyone needs to make a decision of what's the right balance for them. And like early in my career, like, yeah, worked long hours, did a lot of learning on my own to really advance my career. And then, then I started a family and went for a different balance. And so I alternate sometimes between like, a higher intensity versus the lower intensity. And yeah, I think it's find the right balance for yourself. But I think it's if you're looking to grow your career, like there is no, at least in my experience, and if someone knows it, please send it to me. Like there's no shortcut for lack of like for just putting in the work and working really hard.
Very cool, very cool. And what excites you about the future of where you're at now in your career, in your role? What excites you?
Yeah, I'm just in a very fortunate position where I have the luxury of, choosing what I want to do, and so I think that's done in two ways. One is being very conscious of my lifestyle and life choices aligned to my income level, and where in my goals now are less about like top line how big is my T4? It's not my goal anymore, but like, what is the right balance for my family and spending time with them, doing what I enjoy and what makes me happy and quality of life for me and believing in what I'm doing and getting to work with great, smart people. And I think the key to that throughout my career has been early on, I was chasing money, but then I pivoted to aligning my lifestyle to my income level and ensuring that I never felt trapped at a job where it's like, okay, I've negotiated some crazy role. I'm in a job that I don't like, but I'm making lots of money, but like I'm actually unhappy here. And so sometimes people might get a promotion and they're doing what they don't enjoy. And they might then like increase their lifestyle to like, okay, I can't leave or I can't, I'm stuck in this career path. So I think it's being mindful of like, for me, my goal is around like hey, having the luxury to choose what I want to do and enjoy the time I spend at work is my primary goal. And I think that's what I look for the future, is finding great companies that I can help and be myself and grow and be successful.
What do you think was the moment where that change happened, where you stopped trying to chase growth in terms of the way you looked at it at the time to an expanded view of growth? What can you point it back to a moment where it was like, nah, that now that you look back, it's like this was because if I think about your career, that moment was your co-op term. That really opened your eyes to what it means to be a professional and set you on the path entering the workforce. Now there was another change. What was the moment that changed that?
Yeah, I think it was after one of the first company I worked at was Clarity Systems. We got bought by IBM, and so I was now working at IBM. And I think it was like I just loved my time at Clarity, grew my career. It was just so I was having so much fun. And then like when IBM came in, different culture, a lot like different priorities, and I realized like, oh, like I'm just not happy here. Like, and when you're not happy, you're not enjoying it, you're less productive. Like, your team notices it, and it's just like, and at that point, like, I probably could have stayed and made more money, but it was more of like, what am I valuing now at my point in life? And I'm making enough money that I'm not stressed about it too much. So where do I want to what's most valuable to me, and it's enjoying my time at work. And so let me go find a company where I can enjoy myself. um
It's
yeah.
interesting, and it's a very mature thing in your career to think about, and I love the language you use about aligning your lifestyle to your income level, right? Because if you're always trying to grow your income level, you can, but it comes at a cost of something else, right? Like you can always chase more money somewhere else. Where did that philosophy come from? Because at that point in your career, it was your first job, and you have this, yeah, like
Yeah,
where did
I
that
think
come from?
I would say I developed at the end of that first job after we got acquired, and I like, oh, I'm not happy here. And I think, and I'll step back for a minute. Like, I think there is like I'm very just fortunate to have picked a very good career path where the income levels are high. So like, totally recognize that not everyone is in that fortunate position. And where like and that was the start of my career. Like, where can I get to an income level where like I'm okay on my bills, and that was my priority for me. And like, but once I got to that level, then I'm like, okay, like, hey, I'm comfortably, paying my rent, or like, I can afford to go out for dinner. Like, I'm at a level where I'm like okay on bills. It then became like, okay, what now? What
Mm.
next? And then that's what triggered the okay, like focus on like my happiness and what I want to do with my life. And I think that probably came, from my parents, my upbringing, and also now my current wife of, who really values like the time and experience of life versus like more material things. And under no, like I enjoy some material things, and like it's more about finding what drives your happiness and what you value most in life, and then finding a job, career, or the balance that fits you. And for me, it was finding something where I could spend lots of time with my family, and I enjoyed the time at work versus, let's say, chasing the highest paycheck possible.
Well, and it's great. What I'm learning about you as we go through this conversation is we started off talking about your upbringing, and you had mentioned the family. You know, you weren't rich, you didn't have a lot of money, and where you spent your money was on experiences and valuing time together to do things, and that kind of got tucked away and then resurfaced itself in a pivotal moment in your career to say like, this is what it's all about.
100%. Yeah, you nailed it.
That's amazing. Matthew, this has been awesome. I want to leave you with this question is, you go to your LinkedIn profile and there's not a lot of information on your LinkedIn profile. But if someone is to look at your LinkedIn profile, what would you want them to know about you that they can't see about you anywhere online?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say I'm like a very just general private person online, as you called out from my LinkedIn profile. But like I think when you work with me and you get to know me, like I'm actually super sharey. Like I'm very happy to share anything at all about myself at a personal level. And so I would say maybe the thing to take away, or the juxtaposition against my LinkedIn profile, like despite what my LinkedIn profile says, like, yeah, very open book. Yeah, very happy to share about my experiences and my journey, and hopefully those help other people as well.
And where's the next bike adventure with your wife, your brother, where's the next one with your family? Where are you planning the next one?
So,
I
so
gotta
I
know.
sold my bike years ago,
Uh,
but I think there will be, and this will have to go through my wife and like a thorough review and consideration process. So I have two young boys, Andrew and Benjamin, 7 and 5. So I suspect when they get a little bit older, that might be when we reignite the motorcycle journey or the vision. But yeah, they are definitely dangerous. So yeah, that'll have to be a family decision, I would say.
no laneways for them to be ripping up and
There are
down.
no, yeah, and also like nowadays, like yeah, things are a little bit more strict, and yeah, I'll definitely no laneways for sure.
Thanks so much for watching. If you liked today's episode, please follow along and hear more great stories from us. Make sure to follow Spark Recruiting on YouTube and LinkedIn. We'll see you next time.